And thank you. I'm very excited to talk. Well, this is the first talk I gave in the year, and it's really nice that is with you. And I'm gonna share a bit of the work we have been doing specifically on the Pacific side, not just raising coral. I'm gonna start just introducing you to a little bit about the restoration topic, and then talk to you about the Pacific side efforts and a bit of the job that specifically Raising Coral has been doing here in Costa Rica. I think it was I'm confused with the new year now, but in April 2021, we started a project in the Caribbean side too. I won't talk about that, but just for you to know. And I just want to confirm that you can see my presentation.
Yes,
Awesome.
we can.
Okay, awesome. Let me know if something happened, you don't hear, the presentation don't go, and I keep talking, so I will appreciate it. So as I say, thank you. As I say, I'm going to talk about coral restoration and also specifically in the Pacific side of Costa Rica. So I want to start with this, right? Why are we talking about coral reef restoration? I saw that you already have been talking about this topic, and actually here in Costa Rica is not an exception of the reality that coral reefs are facing all worldwide. So as we know right now, we have a lot of problems affecting and degrading coral reefs. Here, for example, both pictures or both photos are from Golfo Dulce in the South Pacific of Costa Rica. And this is the problem, right? We are losing these ecosystems' health. We are losing all the goods and benefits we can have from a healthy coral reef. And this is a huge problem that we all know, but now that we are working or personally that I'm working with coral reefs, even when Costa Rica is a marine country, people is not aware about the problem we have with coral reefs. So actually, it's not that common and people don't get it yet, all the problem we are facing right now. And that's why we are talking about coral restoration, because we need to do more. Everything is happening really fast, and with climate change is more than that. I really like to include this graph as part of this conversation because it shows a little bit more of the level of intervention we have to have in coral reefs with all these problems or all these changes, right? And for example, we can see here that the interventions we have to take every time we need to put more effort on those, are like, it costs a lot of time, a lot of people to reach a really good technology or methodology to go with them. And of course, the risk is really risky, all these actions that we need to take. But, we need to think out of the box. I think we all agree that that is something we have to do because we are not in normal conditions anymore. So at the beginning, we didn't have to do much of active interventions. For example, we saw some problems. We talk about species protection, protected areas, but then even in protected areas where we didn't have, for example, fishing activities or we didn't have tourism, we could see reef degradation. And that's why we started talking about active interventions. And one of the first ones we can talk about is ecological restoration. And right now, around the world, there is a lot of effort in this field because it's creating amazing platforms with, we can work not just with the reefs, but also with the social or with the citizen science, for example, is really integrated. So I'm gonna talk more about this topic for sure, but then you can see all these other interventions that are at the scientific level are happening right now and are really risky. For example, assisted evolution or assisted migration, assisted migration. So all these interventions actually, for me at the beginning, were just like, I don't know, like fiction. But right now, we need them. The problem is we don't know what happened after we create these super corals and we put them in a reef right now and the conditions we have right now. Or for example, assisted migration and everything we know how hard could be or how risky it could be to move corals from, let's say, Mexico to Costa Rica, for example. there is a paper published, I think it was 2019, where some people in the Caribbean took some sperm from I think was Florida, eggs from Puerto Rico. This was a crocodile species, and they took them to Curacao. And in Curacao, they did this assisted fertilization, and it was working. So this example is just to show you that actually the idea is how can we do this kind of interventions, decreasing the risk of doing a really or damaging in a worse level the ecosystem. But this is happening right now. And of course, we can talk about ex situ conservation. It's really important. We need reservoirs. We need to keep or save as much as we can. And this is a bit of the work, and I really like this graph. You know, there are a lot of work happening in between, or more new ideas, or a lot of things that we could not include in this graph, but I think it's nice to have a vision or a scenario or how we need to start just doing more as we go, and sadly we can see more impacts in the reef. But as I say, ecological restoration, and specifically reef restoration, is the topic that we are working right now. And just to start, when we talk about this ecological restoration, we talk about assisting the natural recovery of the ecosystem. And we know we cannot recover 100% of what we are losing, and we are talking just about the partial recovery, and it still is a lot of work. All these initiatives or projects should be based in these 4 principles of ecological restoration. Raising Coral based the work here, and I will show you a bit of that, but we truly believe that it's really important to know this. For example, that our initiatives should increase ecological integrity of the places we are making the interventions, to know the past, a bit of the future, the knowledge. This is basically working based on science. And of course, we need to know about the species that create in the ecosystem. What are these scenarios or conditions that are the predictions we have are gonna happen? Then social integration is really important, and long-term sustainability. I don't know how familiar are you with this, but I really want to include it in the introduction. And for example, here in Costa Rica, because underwater nurseries are really attractive, people understand right now coral reef restoration as just growing corals in these structures is really like sexy for selling to the tourism and other ones. But there are different interventions. Of course, there is a lot of planning, and it depends of what you want to do. Sometimes you don't need to grow corals. You can just go to the place, or there are some interventions that direct transplant of corals, for example, or just working with the substrate, or ex situ work. And it's important to know about this. So going specifically to Costa Rica, I don't know if you know Costa Rica, but this is my country. As I say at the beginning, Costa Rica is a marine country. Even when some people don't get it, and at the political level, we are starting just to call the attention to the ocean. But the terrestrial area, for example, is just like 50,000 square kilometers, and the marine area is more than 10 times that. And you know, it's amazing when you hear that, you say like, oh, we are so lucky. And we are so lucky. And we have the Caribbean Sea, and we have the Pacific Ocean. But you know, this means a lot of responsibility too. And means a lot of, you know, the Caribbean and the Pacific do not have many things in common, talking at ecological or social levels. So I think the problem has been that we didn't give enough attention to the marine area, marine ecosystems, marine ocean health until now. We are working on that. It's just that, you know, it was a lot of responsibility, and nobody was putting enough attention to that. But anyway, we do have them. It's amazing. Costa Rica is beautiful. Costa Rica is an example of forest reforestation. Actually, when in Latin America was having like the highest deforestation rates, Costa Rica was having the highest restoration rates. And right now what we need to do is just to replicate exactly all the political efforts, people's effort and investments. Now we need to replicate it in the marine area. And it's a bit of what we are trying to do. Going more to the Pacific coast, this is how it looks. So in the darker areas are the marine protected areas we have right now. And the numbers are the names. And then in the stars, you can see blue and green is where we have the main coral reef communities or coral communities or coral reefs. Because in the American Pacific, we do not talk a lot about coral reefs. We have a few species that develop the reefs, and we have, for example, like not this large coral reef formation is a little bit different because of the conditions of the Earth's tropical Pacific. But still, science showed that the ones we have are really important, and they have this complex interactions as it happens in these really diverse places. And well, as you can see here, for example, we have Cocos Island, that is a really beautiful place, almost a pristine place right now. And the other places are just really close to the coast, and the conditions are, well, we lost around 80–90% of the coral coverage and the health of these places, but some of them are recovering slowly. So specifically about reef restoration, these are the main projects that are happening right now on the Pacific coast. Reef restoration is a new topic, a really new topic in Costa Rica. You know, we started in 2016, and we can say that we were creating the baseline work here in Costa Rica. And so, for example, in Bahia Culebra, there is a project. The main goal of this project was to work with different actors. So, for example, we have the private business, NGOs, the government, and just trying to see how sustainability could look when you have a private investment. In Samara, it's a totally different project. It's most a little community say we want to do something. They got the training and they have a little operation. And the main goal is that how community can work in this kind of projects with in a responsible way. Then in Quepos, there is a project, marine conservation. This NGO is working more with tourism, with education. So they have this operation, and their goal is to show people how restoration has an impact. And also they train people. In Vita, for example, is a really new project. I think they didn't have corals in the water, but they created a little laboratory with a container, and their goal is to use this as an educational platform, show people corals, to grow corals, and also to try to use them in restoration in this area. And Golfo Dulce, that is the main reef restoration place here well, the biggest operation that Raising Coral Costa Rica has right now. And as I said before, we started in 2016, and this was the first place. We started working in Golfo Dulce because, well, as you can see, well, Costa Rica is a little country, but still the Golfo Dulce is like an isolated area. But in this case, it's a really an advantage because we don't have a lot of coastal development, a lot of efforts here in the coastal zone and protected areas. So that has been improving the ocean conditions because deforestation is stopped in a really good way. So natural recovery of the forest has improved the sedimentation rates coming to the Golfo Dulce. Even that we have users, we don't have that many. We have tourism, but a really ecological tourism. And so Golfo Dulce is amazing. I invite you to visit it because it's magic. And talking specifically at these specific efforts, so one of the main goals is, to work on techniques and methodology. Something important to know here is that most of these techniques and work is basically, the species you have if they are branching corals, massive corals, and based on that, you start working with the techniques. When we started, because this was the first project with underwater nurseries in the Eastern tropical Pacific, we basically started taking or copying techniques that were developed in the Caribbean. You know, we just had to try it. Some things didn't work. We need to adapt the technique, and other ones, but it has been really amazing. And luckily, some of them did work perfect. So, for example, this branching coral, the genus Pocillopora, is one of the main genus growing, creating reefs here in the Pacific side of the country. Something like nice to know when we started. Well, it's nice and not nice, but with all the sedimentation problems we had at the beginning, Pocillopora was one of the genus that was really affected. So because of Dr. Jorge Cortez, that is the coral reef expert in Costa Rica, in his PhD, he showed that actually Pocillopora is one of the main corals creating the reef in all this period of time, like 50,000 years ago. But even so, because of the conditions we had, this coral was almost gone. And something really interesting is that, well, it was hard to find some donors in Golfo Dulce to take little samples. We had to bring Don Jorge to Golfo Dulce to show us where the corals were, and we found a few. And right now we have more corals than in the nurseries that you can find in the wild. And also, you know, it's really strategic to work with these branching corals and to start just, you know, creating and helping the reef to come back. So we have been working with these techniques. For example, there is a structure called Christmas tree, or it's like an old antenna here in Latin America, but let's call it Christmas tree. And what we do is to take little pieces of this branching coral. We don't take more than the 10% of the size of the colony to avoid damaging the donor. And we just were hanging these corals individually in this structure, and that was amazing. And we found that, for example, here in Golfo Dulce, in a period of time of 9 months, 12 months maximum, the colonies were ready to go to the reef. And of course, in a year where we don't have problems like warming or anything happen, red tides or anything happen. So in 9 months, we had the corals ready to go. And the picture too, you can see, for example, this was like 5 or 6 months after, something like that, of the colony. So actually they are growing really, really well. Then we started working also with the rope nursery that is in the picture 3 that you can see. As this structure is really nice because you can have like 200 corals in the same structure. But the tree is better if you want to do some research, because you can follow a colony individually. But in the rope nursery, actually, they are going to start fusing, and it's gonna be harder to follow that information, that record. And in the picture 4, you can see one of the main outplanting techniques that we have, because we are not using nails or zip ties. At the beginning, well, this is one of the techniques used in the Caribbean, but of course, as you go, you want to be less invasive, let's say, and you want to use less things for putting the corals back. So I will show you the new techniques we are using. But this is really nice. And for example, in the North Pacific of Costa Rica, in Bahia Culebra, the place I show you at the north side, they are also including this kind of structures that has been really positive. As you can see in the substrate is different. They don't have like substrate right now in the place. So you need to work with the techniques in a different way when you want to outplant the corals or to start just planting them, because everything is not like stable. So it has been just really interesting. We know that what is working here in Golfo Dulce in the south probably is not gonna work in the same way in the north, but people is just trying to be as responsible as possible with the work they are doing. For example, this is about the outplants. For example, here in the first picture on top, what you can see is the technique we are using right now. What we are doing is using this nail, we call it in Espanol, like grapas, but it's like a U-shaped nail. It's little, and also we are using monofilament to attach the coral to the substrate. And we are avoiding the epoxy, the marine epoxy, and in that way also we don't have like this large nail that in a few times it's going to be just like really erosive, not corrosive. Well, yeah. And so this has been amazing. This technique we are using, it works. The corals like it, and you can see, for example, in the other photo how the corals look, and that is the rope, for example, is easier to attach to the substrate. And the big picture at the right, you can see this is an all outplant, and is working, right? And also something important that I was planning to say in the conclusions, but I think is important here with this picture, is that we are aware that restoration is not about restoring all the reefs, right? This is about being strategic. We need to know our places. We know Golfo Dulce, so if we can start planning the patches, we try, for example, to do little patches from the same donor. So in some months, they start fusing and they can have a bigger area in a short period of time. And so that's the idea, to be really strategic to the places we are working on, and also to plan or design how are we doing this intervention. So it's not just planting corals and not having the record or the plan of this work. Then we have been working also with massive corals, as I showed you. These, for example, are Porites and Pavona gigantea. This is totally different. In the picture one, you can see we do microfragmentation with these corals. They need the substrate to grow, so we have an electric saw, and we make the cuts, really little pieces of corals. We wait until they fill the ceramic disc you can see here, and it has been like amazing. You know, with Pavona gigantea, in 6 months they are actually fusing in this grid. But with Porites it was really interesting because we didn't make it work. So at the beginning we put these fragments just hanging in the tree, but we had a lot of predation of this Ballistide, a triggerfish, and so the corals disappear totally. And then we had to protect them in the underwater structure or in the nursery site with a mesh, so in that way the fish cannot go to the coral. The problem is when we protect the coral, we also avoid predators for competitors. So for example, like after a month, we could see sponges, we could see everything growing on Porites, not in Pavona gigantea. So Pavona gigantea works really well, but with Porites is not in that way. So we stopped growing Porites in our nursery site, but we're just making experiments. And actually we are finding that we don't need to put them in the structure. Actually, if we can do microfragmentation and planting the coral straight to the dead coral substrate, they are doing great. If we can use protection for just, like a couple of months, it helps, and the coral is growing just amazing, and they start fusing, and so I think this is what we have to do, just try different things and start learning. And this is, for example, well, that is also the way we outplant the corals. So we have an underwater drill. We make holes in the coral substrate. And we were using marine epoxy at the beginning to help them. Well, you saw here the ceramic disc, but it has like a mushroom shape. It has, so with the hole we make in the substrate, if we have the right bit, we can just put the disc or the ceramic mushroom, and it's perfect. We don't need the marine epoxy. And it has been really cool just to see how the corals those views after, 1-2 months, they start just growing, and we plant the corals from the same donor close for sure. And in a few months, they are bigger, and maybe the size that in nature can take a lot of time. So as I say, this is about being strategic and just going slowly and learning. And part of the work is building capacity. We have been working a lot in the social part, building capacity at local level. At the beginning, I was working with my thesis in social perception. I wanted to know what local people knew about their coral reefs, the coral reefs that are here in Gulf Coast while I live here in the South. And so what they knew about coral reefs and also what they perceive, it was really interesting. They have been here for all their life, and even so they didn't know, most of them, where the corals are. And some of them talk about like the corals are beautiful when they are white. And so you say like, oh, so we have a lot of work to do in the social part. But building capacity, working with the people has been one of the most beautiful experiences ever. Creating the connection, the people with the reef again is amazing. This picture specifically is about an activity we had on December, and this is more like volunteers from the country coming for the first time to work in this, and we planted like more than 250 corals in the reef. But it was just like amazing because the leaders of this training were the local people we were training, right? People that actually didn't work in science before, or like in conservation or other ones. And it was just really nice to see how engaged they are with the topic. Now like they talk about my coral reefs and all the work they are doing to do something. Also, we have been with these Pacific experiences, we have been trying to give guidance on how to do it in the right way. This protocol was published in 2020 and is free online, and I can send it to you if you want, but it's a protocol. We are trying to avoid the problems that happen in other countries in the Caribbean, for example. Like everybody wanted to grow corals because it's too easy. You just go take pieces of corals and put a really cheap structure on the water and the corals grow. And so we are trying to avoid all of that and trying to be more responsible and avoid problems. Sometimes it's not that easy, but it's part of the work we are doing. And we have support from the government, at least in this topic, so it has been really, really good. For raising coral, and specifically here in Golfo Dulce, I can tell you that right now we have 14, in the nursery side, we have 14 structures. We have 10 trees, as you can see on the photo, 1 spider as an experiment, and 3 rope nurseries. And we have in stock right now more than 1,000 Pocillopora colonies growing, and more than 200 Pavona colonies growing. In the outplants, we have more than 1,000 outplanted corals. And as I said, with all the years we have been working, maybe sounds like a few corals, but actually, when you want to try to do it like saying in a scientific way, this is more about ethical work and trying to just try to see how a few corals do, and just try to measure as much as you can. But we feel really confident about the work we are doing and very excited. We have been working in 5 restoration sites in Golfo Dulce, and we have been working with approximately 8 coral species that are the main reef builders in the Pacific side of Costa Rica. When we talk about reef restoration actions or work, we talk a lot about being there, right? One of the main things people say, warming is gonna happen again, and all your corals are gonna die, right? And you say like, wait, it's gonna happen. We don't know many things. That's the problem, right? But something we know, or we can appreciate a lot about the restoration work, is that we now are there. For example, I want to give you this example. In January 2020, we had a warming event. Actually, in January is we have high temperatures, it's normal, but what we saw with our temperature sensors is that what we didn't have is with the tide changes, we didn't have cold waters coming. Actually, these cold waters keep the corals healthy even with the 32 Celsius degrees or 33, which is a lot, but the corals look right with those conditions. But this January in 2020, we had just like all the corals were bleached in the nursery side. Something interesting for us, really painful, right? After this dive, I say like, oh no, that's all. But something really nice is, for example, right now we have, well, or like some months ago, we have 16 Pocillopora donors in the nursery site. After this warming event, we had a mortality of 9%. And when we started the corals that died and thinking in donors and everything, we found that we had some donors that they performed really well under these conditions, while some other ones didn't. So for example, we had donor 12 and donor 31 with really high mortality. 85% of the corals that we had in the nursery died, while there were other colonies that didn't have mortality at all, but all the colonies were bleached. So for example, donor 20 or donor 33, they perform really well. And this is something, right? It means a lot, because this means that we can measure or see the performance of some of the donors. And hopefully this year we can talk not about donors, but at genotypes. And also, this is what restoration means. If we can be in the site and we can be, if it's possible to take this data, is going to help a lot. It doesn't mean we are not going to propagate donor 12 or donor 31, but we have an idea of these other donors that can perform good under these conditions, and then we can see if a red tide happened, what happened with the performance of these corals. So, it has been really interesting just to be there, have corals, and start just observing. Another way we couldn't do it. So about social integration, as I say, we have been doing a really good job. I'm proud of that. We have been training people. These people, we have women that actually they are just mothers, or they love the ocean, but it's not possible here to work in the ocean if you are a woman. And so we have been just asking for the sponsors to do this kind of trainings. We gave them an open water training. Then we gave a coral restoration training with some input or some training about tourism, because the idea is if we can do some of these activities, we can create more opportunities to local people. Right now, we have 8 coral gardeners, for example, that support or assist raising coral work in the field. We go 6 times per month to the field, and that means that they have a really important income that in other way they wouldn't. Then, as I say, we are planning tourism activities, trying to be as responsible as possible. And the main thing is citizen science and increase incomes in local communities, doing a really a strong work in education, like coastal communities, educational centers, and working with other NGOs or companies developing interactive tools that we hope to have in our social medias or website. As a conclusion, something that we have been learning is pilot projects and reef restoration are important. We can not say that everything is going to work that simple. It's really important to do this in science-based work. It's not that easy. Everybody cannot do it, but I think at national level or in some way, we need to be able to or give the guidance or at least to evaluate what people is doing, because, good intentions are amazing, but we can not, good intentions cannot run the world all the time. We need to do this more scientific. Monitoring is key. Long-term initiatives. We don't talk about ecological restoration in any ecosystem in just 1 year or 2 years. We need to be ready with funds, with adapting the proposals and other ones in the long term. As I said before, strategic interventions, maybe if we can start just integrating these science tools, if we can know exactly where corals are reproducing and where the larvae are going, we can start just thinking, where can we put our effort, right? Where can we start working with the corals, protecting the corals in case we need. So we need to be more strategic and creating alliances. And of course, as we call it, we think that all this reef restoration work is more about creating a human-coral symbiosis, right? If we see like the corals and the degradation we're facing right now, and the opportunity or the chance that reef restoration can give, and the learning and everything we can do with these platforms, I think we can be an important symbiosis in this situation. So this is a bit of the coral reef restoration work that we have been doing in the Pacific side of Costa Rica. So I hope you have questions, and thank you very much for the opportunity.